Hey watch friends, today we're going to check out the latest offering from the Singaporean microbrand Vario. This is their 1945 A-11S. The S stands for solar, which is pretty well on the nose, but we'll explore why that is. This one is, as of time of publishing, already live on their website. I'll of course have a link down in the video description if you care to check it out. And if you saw that banner, they did send this one into the channel, and I always of course want to be upfront about that. This watch ships in a nice utilitarian pouch that I think is befitting of the style of this watch. As far as the basic specs, this comes standard with a 2-year warranty. The case, measured from roughly the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position, is coming in at 39.9 millimeters. The bezel steps down right at a millimeter, and that is coming in at 38.8 millimeters. The lugs are a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lug to lug is a reasonably compact 47.8 millimeters. The thickness actually outperforms what they stated, or they undersold rather and over-delivered here. This is only coming in on my calipers at 9.3 millimeters. So despite the fact that they say 10 millimeters on the website, which isn't too thick in and of itself, this feels significantly thinner, and it is because it's only coming in just over 9. The crystal on this is a flat sapphire crystal, which does feature an inner AR coating. As far as the movement, as I said at the outset, this is going to be a solar movement choice, specifically from Miyota. This is the 2170. So what you're looking at there is this is solar powered, so it's going to be a quartz style movement, but that does have solar charging ability for that as well. Once this has a full charge, it has a stated spec of 4 months of holding that charge. So it does give you plenty of time in between getting that sun exposure out there, though obviously you can always keep it topped up by keeping it out in the sun as well. As far as the water resistance, this is coming at 50 meters or 5 atmospheres. Definitely not the highest, however, I think for this military styling and what this is, I think that's sufficient. I always like to see 100 plus, but that being said, I think this is just fine. As far as the weight, on this factory included strap here, this thing is an absolute featherweight. It's only coming in at 52.8 grams. So you're looking at just over 50 grams. It pretty much, as you'd expect, disappears on the wrist. So great for overall comfort and not giving you any fatigue or anything like that. But it still actually feels, despite the fact that it is so light, that a lot of that's owing, of course, to the canvas strap here. It still feels reasonably stout on wrist as far as just solid, that is, which I think is befitting of the military styling of this one. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive deeper and get a better feel for this particular model. As far as the colors, there's 3 variants available. There's of course the black that we're looking at today. There's additionally a white version, which is a little dressier, and then there's one that's kind of splits the difference and is gray right in between there for styling. Each of these is going to feature a fine sand texture. I do emphasize the fine sand because it actually reminds me of like a fine grit sandpaper for that. And what that does is that actually gives an interesting sheen and light play for it. Because of that textural effect that you have going on there, as you move it around, despite the fact that this isn't a fume or gradient or anything like that, this actually does pick up just a little bit of sheen. And for this black version in particular, I find sometimes it looks like a charcoal, like a deep charcoal color, and then other times it does look like a pure jet black as well. So that's a pretty nice touch there. As far as the 12 o'clock position, you can see that this does have a what I would call stealth logo application. So they went with a black text for this. On camera, as you're seeing it here, it's probably a little more apparent or looks a little more contrasty with this direct ambient light. However, in real world usage, it's easy to miss that it's even there, and I really appreciate that. They kept the branding while at the same time keeping that kind of minimalist, clean aesthetic for the dial, which I think is in keeping with the vintage origins of this. Out at the perimeter, you can see that this does have a chapter ring. That is a printed chapter ring. You have nice legibility for it. You're going to have your numerals at the 10-minute increments. They do flip from the 10 to 20 as far as for direction, which that's always nice to see for legibility. But then additionally, in between those, you can see there are 5-minute hashes as well. And then in between those, you have your individual minute and second hashes as well. The second, though, isn't real applicable, as we'll see here with that little disc second hand in the middle. And then at the 12 o'clock position, you do have that nice little color accent with that kind of V pip or inverted V pip there. As far as the hardware, the handset on this is what I would describe as being a sword. It doesn't have, the fully tapered base, but I think it's reminiscent of that styling and of that shape. The finishing on this particular one is going to be a matte white around the border. So that gives you excellent contrast against this black dial, not only the white coloration inclusive of the lume, but additionally that matte texture. It really, no matter how the light is hitting it, very easy to make out those hands. That's excellent there. And then as I already alluded to, in the middle there, you can see this does actually have a running second, and they put that tiny little disc as kind of like a pinion cap in there with just that little dot. That is such a good touch in my opinion. Not only do I think it is interesting stylistically, but for those who don't like a sterile quartz where you don't see any movement on the dial, this gives you that movement. But for those like myself who do not like the jarring effect that you get with that tick from a typical quartz, this has really, it's so small that it's not even effectively noticeable that you're having a tick. Basically, it looks like the second hand is stationary until you realize no, it actually is moving around there. As far as the markers on this, you can see that this does have numerals all the way around the dial, keeping in with that military styling. They are printed. It's a relatively thick printing, so it almost gives a little bit of that depth of like a thin applied, but it does, to my eye, look to be a thickly printed loom for that. And then as far as the loom itself, this is BGW9 for your handset as well as your markers. As you can see here, for loom performance, it's not going to blow you away. I think it does fine for what it is, for the styling. Anytime you're dealing with printing, I have never found any printed dial, no matter how thick they go with it, that actually performs anywhere near like a true full, filled for your loom, or for your markers rather. As far as the handset, it performs decently as well. With light play for this, as you move across lighting conditions, because this isn't the strongest loom in the world and because there's not a lot going on with the dial, there's not a lot to write home about for that, but I think it gives a decent effect for the overall style. One of the cool little touches they did do here is they actually featured loom on the crown as well. So that's a nice little touch and nod, and it's subtly incorporated so it's not too in your face. As far as the bezel on this, as we already looked at, is a fixed bezel construction, and it is set back about 1 millimeter from the case edge there. The bezel is pretty steeply sloped, though I think it's nicely and cleanly incorporated to integrate and merge between that crystal and the in the case there. It is going to be a polish and brush sandwich here, so you can see you have a thin little lip of brushing, then you have a nice little deft touch of polishing, and then it comes back to more prominently from the face view where you can see that it does have a nice flat brushed area. That is going to be circular brushing working its way around there. As far as the case itself, the case in this is what I would describe as just like a smooth arch. It's a very traditional look to this, and because it is such a thin case, I think it nice and cleanly keeps from having that slab effect or anything here. It just really kind of melts into your wrist, and that's inclusive of this downturn, which, as you can see, the downturn comes. I'm definitely proud of the case back. However, I haven't found, at least on my wrist, that causes it to rise up or dig into the wrist or anything there. Wears perfectly as far as comfort. The finishing on this is horizontal brushing, so that's running the length of the case front to rear, which is generally speaking my preference, not only visually, but I also do think that helps to kind of slim that out a little bit. As we already looked at, it does have pretty pronounced for downturn of the lugs, and then additionally, as you look out towards the edge, you can see that this does have drilled lug holes as well. And then shifting to the front view of the lugs, you can see this does have a very subtle little chamfer cut. Again, just another nice little kiss of a polish there. So it keeps that rugged kind of totally look to this, while at the same time breaking things up so it's not just too sterile or too stark with all polish. And then you can see that the polishing there kind of carries over with like a circular across the lugs as well. Again, I think very cleanly incorporated and nice there as well. As far as the crown is, as I'm sure you already noticed, at the 4 o'clock position. It does not have a crown guard for this, which again, I think is in keeping with the style. The crown itself is coming in at 5.8 millimeters. It's a push-pull construction, as you'd probably expect for this movement style and water resistance, so you just grab a hold of that. The edge is going to be a very traditional coin edge for that. And then as you look out to the face of that, you can see that this is polished, but it is also, as we already saw, signed and loom applied there as well. Shifting over to the case back on this is a screw-in construction. You're going to be looking at a polish out on your outside lip there, where you're not going to get as prone to fingerprints, though certainly you'll still pick them up. And then in the middle, you can see that this does have circular brushing for its main finish, which again, I think is in keeping and cohesive with the overall style. In the middle there, you can't miss the fact that this does have a nicely milled in origami crane. That is a nice nod to piece there as far as for the heritage of this, as well as kind of just the overall tie-in. So that's a cool touch there. It is very subtle and basic as far as the overall, I should say, it's a fairly clean aesthetic for this. Not a lot going on to that, not a ton of depth or anything, which does cause it to wear very well on the wrist, but definitely a nice little unique touch there. The case back itself is very thin, just like the rest of the watch, so it doesn't cause any flying saucer effect or anything like that. As far as the strap on this is coming in, of course, at 20 millimeters at the lugs, and it does taper down to 18 millimeters at the buckle. As I already mentioned, this is a canvas strap, so you're looking at canvas all the way around. That's both on the exterior and interior. I found out of the box it's reasonably supple. Certainly it's not going to be the most pliable in the world, and it will break in, but really actually found this, especially for being a freebie on a relatively inexpensive watch. I think this is a pretty nice quality strap overall. This particular one does have matching stitching, so you're looking at black on black for this. It is reinforced for all of your holes, which that's always a nice touch there. It helps to keep the, from getting fraying and what have you, as well as there's a pretty good size range, certainly for my wrist. It has a little bit of extra there, and then it could go plenty larger than my wrist as well. It does feature quick release spring bars on the back, so in addition to the drilled lug holes, you do have quick release spring bars, so very easy to change that around there. And then additionally, as far as the buckle, you're going to see that this is a nice curved buckle, so no hot spots or anything like that. It does have brushing, as well as it is signed very subtly with kind of etched in with their logo there. Alright, so now you should have a much better feel for this watch, but let's go ahead and round things out with some comps, and I use this loosely just to give you an idea of some different things here. So first, comparing next to a Pilot watch, this is specifically the Wise Flyboy, and this is coming in at 39.5 millimeters. You can see it does, to my eye, have more presence to it, though it's hard to tell because this one has the black dial, but I do think the Wise presents a little larger despite being a little smaller in size. And then next up, here it is next to an MMI Sky Hunter. So again, sticking with kind of aviation style, but gives you the numerals and stuff. So you're looking at 38 millimeters on this, and I think these two stack up relatively similarly as far as sizing there. And then here it is next to a Henry Archer Vesterhoff, and this is giving you a little lighter dial here, and this is more of a traditional field type watch here, though obviously it's more fanciful or dressier field, but that is coming in at 40 millimeters there, and I do of course have reviews of all of those. And then finally, just rounding this out, because of the solar aspect here, I brought in just a Casio G-Shock. This is one of the 5000Us, which is the metal construction there on a combi bracelet. But just, not really a lot to compare between these other than the fact that this is solar and atomic. This, unfortunately, isn't atomic, but it does have the solar aspect. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and talk about some of the pros, in my view, as well as some critiques, and then wrap things up with a summary. First, for the pros. To me, this, as we've already kind of touched upon throughout, this has that classic kind of vintage styling for it, while at the same time, you do have some modern elements or modern touches, particularly with the movement choice. So you're not going to have the maintenance that you would have with a true vintage watch, while at the same time, I think this very well embodies that vintage look and pays a nice homage to it. The sizing, I think, is very versatile. As we saw, despite the fact that this is listed as 40 millimeters, I think it does wear a bit smaller and present a bit smaller than 40 millimeters. Part of that, I'm sure, is owing to this black dial. I expect the white and then the gray, to a lesser extent, will wear larger or present larger for it. But I do think the sizing's pretty versatile. It has plenty of wrist filling and presence for my wrist of 6.5 inches. I think you could go certainly smaller because of the proportions of this, but at the same time, for those who are looking for a larger wrist and who have a larger wrist and are looking for a little larger size, the 40 millimeter, like I said, it wears a little smaller, but I still think it fills up and offers plenty of presence. So good versatility there. The fit and finish, I think, is pretty excellent on this, as well as the value. We haven't talked about the pricing. This is only $198, so you're looking at just under $200 US for it. For that price, the fit and finish on this, getting the solar movement instead of just traditional quartz, getting your nice canvas, reinforced strap, all that kind of stuff, as well as a little like soft pouch that you can travel with, all those kind of good things. I think for $200, you're getting a heck of a lot of watch. And then the legibility, just as you would want in this military style watch, fantastic legibility there. As you can see here, great contrast, especially on this dial here, with having that white against the black. So really no complaints there. So what about some critiques? One of the things to be aware of, despite the fact that this has a solar movement in it, I do want to mention not all solar is created equal. I will say the Casio, that G-Shock that we just looked at, those things are phenomenal. Any light whatsoever I have found, and they're charging themselves. In a relatively dark room, they're still charging. This does require more deliberate light for it. I intentionally left it in a light-starved area just to see how it would perform with a G-Shock, and I will say this is not as easy to charge, but again, as long as you put this out in the direct sun, get a full charge, you've got 4 months of battery life out of it, so I don't think that's any problem there. It's just something to be aware of. And then for, as I mentioned earlier, for those who don't like a quartz tick, this does still have it. I mean, with that small disc there, you can see it is still going to be abrupt. It still does have that tick for it, but it is so small and so innocuous. It's just something to be aware of. Really, I had to nitpick because there's not a whole lot to complain about with this watch. The final thing is the loom strength. Certainly they could kick that up. Had they done, one of the 3D blocks or something, which I think would have ruined the style for this watch. There are things they could have done to make it a little stronger. It's just something to be aware of. Like I said, fairly nitpicky items because I think for the money, it's pretty tough to complain at a $200 watch delivering what this one does. So where does that leave us? I mean, I should be pretty clear there, and as I just alluded to, this one has that vintage styling with the modern reliability, ease of maintenance, all those kinds of things. But additionally, you're going to be looking at what I think is a solid, go anywhere, do anything kind of watch out there. So if you're looking for a great grab and go option, if you're looking for that vintage styling, I definitely think this one's worth a look. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy it, do tap that like button. If you haven't already done so, smash that subscribe button. Finally, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you like the style? Have you messed with this or other solar watches out there? How's your experience been as far as the charging, especially compared to G-Shocks? I think that's pretty much the gold standard as far as that goes. But additionally, what color do you like best? All that kind of good stuff. Thanks for watching.